Some people are born into ordinary lives. Catherine Kate Hargrove was not one of them. By the time she was 7 years old, she had already learned to read an aircraft the way other children read picture books, not through the words on a page, but through the tremor of metal under her fingertips and the pitch of an engine speaking a language most adults never heard. Her father had given her that. Robert Hargrove, three-star general, Medal of Honor recipient, and the most decorated test pilot in the modern Air Force, had understood from her earliest years that his daughter possessed something rarer than talent. She possessed mechanical empathy, an almost cellular understanding of what a machine was trying to say. Now, at 38, with 15 years of F-35 flight time behind her, and a thin streak of silver threading through her dark hair, Major Catherine Hargrove was about to need every ounce of it. At 30,000 feet, the Arizona desert floor resembled another planet entirely, distant and unconcerned with human troubles. Kate banked her F-35 Lightning II into a steep turn, feeling the familiar surge of G-forces pressing against her flight suit. The aircraft responded like an extension of her own body, the culmination of American engineering excellence and her years of experience moving in perfect harmony. Until it wasn't. The first warning came as a slight shudder through the airframe. Most pilots might have dismissed it as turbulence. Kate knew better. Her father had taught her that an aircraft in distress communicated the way a person in pain communicated, not always in words, but always in truth, if you were willing to listen. The master caution light flashed red. Then the primary flight display flickered and went dark. Eagle 1 experiencing critical systems failure, she reported calmly into her oxygen mask, even as her heart rate spiked. The radio crackled with the immediate response from Edwards Air Force Base Flight Control. Eagle 1, this is Control. Recommend immediate ejection protocol. Repeat, recommend immediate ejection. The voice belonged to Colonel Frank Dawson, her father's oldest friend and her current commanding officer. She could hear the concern beneath his professional tone. 3 more warning lights flashed across her console as the F-35's fly-by-wire system began to unravel. The $80 million aircraft was transforming into the world's most sophisticated glider with each passing second. Negative on ejection control. I can bring her home. In the control room, 30 pairs of eyes fixed on monitors tracking the wounded aircraft. Among them, Captain James Caldwell leaned toward his colleague. She's crazy. That bird is falling out of the sky. Colonel Dawson overheard the comment but kept his attention on the radio. Major Hargrove, this is a direct order. Eject now. Kate's hands moved across the cockpit with deliberate precision. Where others saw chaos in the blinking warning lights, she saw patterns. Where standard protocol demanded abandonment, she saw a narrow corridor of possibility. Her father's voice echoed from some far corner of memory. Sometimes the manual is wrong, Katie girl. Sometimes you have to trust what the aircraft is telling you. Sir, with respect, I've identified the problem. Primary flight control processor is locked in a feedback loop with the redundant system. I'm initiating manual override sequence. She switched off the automated systems one by one, feeling the aircraft immediately become heavier in her hands. Without the computer assistance, flying the F-35 was like trying to redirect a falling meteor with sheer willpower. The G-forces increased as she fought to maintain control, each muscle in her body straining against the punishing physics. In the control room, silence fell as they watched the impossible unfold. The F-35's erratic descent began to stabilize. The altitude readout, which had been dropping alarmingly, now held steady at 15,000 feet. I have control, Kate reported, her voice strained by the physical exertion. Requesting emergency landing clearance. Colonel Dawson's weathered face broke into the faintest smile. "Runway 29er cleared for emergency landing, Eagle 1. You're making this old man proud." The landing was anything but standard. With minimal systems operational, Kate brought the wounded fighter down through sheer skill and determination. The tires screeched against concrete as the F-35 touched down harder than regulation permitted, but intact. Emergency vehicles raced alongside as the aircraft rolled to a stop, their lights painting the scene in rhythmic flashes of red and yellow. When the canopy finally raised, Kate removed her helmet with hands that only now allowed themselves to tremble slightly. Her dark hair, streaked with premature silver, was matted with sweat. Her face, carrying the determined features of 3 generations of military Hargroves, finally relaxed into something that was not quite relief, more like a debt acknowledged and deferred. The ground crew stared in barely disguised awe. What they had just witnessed wasn't in any training manual. It wasn't supposed to be possible. Captain Caldwell stood among the gathering crowd, his earlier skepticism replaced by something more complicated than admiration. He watched her climb down from the cockpit with the unhurried economy of a woman who had just done something extraordinary and already moved past it. A veteran crew chief standing nearby spoke without taking his eyes off the aircraft. "Because she's Robert Hargrove's daughter, the apple didn't just fall close to the tree, it grew roots right there." The debriefing room hummed with subdued energy. Officers and engineers crowded around tablets displaying flight data and system logs from Kate's near catastrophe. Colonel Dawson stood at the head of the table, his 60 years showing in the deep lines of his face, but not in his ramrod-straight posture. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we've witnessed today isn't just exceptional piloting. Major Hargrove has exposed a critical flaw in the F-35's flight control system that could have cost us pilots and aircraft." He nodded toward Kate, who sat quietly, still in her flight suit. "Major, walk us through what happened up there." All eyes turned to her. Kate stood, moving to the digital display. Unlike many pilots who became animated when discussing their exploits, she spoke with measured precision, her hands occasionally gesturing to highlight specific data points. The primary issue was a cascading failure in the flight control system. The main processor entered a logic loop with its backup, each one countermanding the other's commands. She brought up a sequence of code. This timestamp shows the exact moment when both systems attempted to correct what they perceived as instability. The result was actual instability. An engineer raised his hand. "Major, with all due respect, the manual procedure for this scenario is immediate ejection. How did you determine an alternative approach was viable?" Kate's eyes met his without flinching. Because the aircraft was still responding to inputs between the error cycles. There was a pattern, a 3-second window where manual commands would register before being overridden. I synchronized my inputs with that window. "That's impossible," Caldwell spoke from the back of the room. "Nobody can time manual inputs with that level of precision while experiencing those G-forces." The room fell silent. Caldwell was the squadron's rising star, a Top Gun graduate with natural talent and the perpetual half-smile of someone who found most challenges beneath him. Today, for the first time, he looked uncertain. Kate didn't rise to the bait. "The telemetry data confirms my account, Captain. I suggest you review it before questioning my report." Colonel Dawson stepped in. "The fact remains that Major Hargrove identified and exploited a systemic vulnerability that our best engineers and test pilots missed. This isn't about exceptional reflexes. This is about understanding the fundamental engineering of these aircraft beyond what's in the manual." The meeting continued, but the undercurrents had been established. In a room full of elite pilots and engineers, Kate Hargrove had demonstrated she was operating on another level entirely. It wasn't just skill. It was something more fundamental, something that couldn't be manufactured in flight school or engineering programs. As the briefing concluded, Colonel Dawson held Kate back with a gentle hand on her shoulder. When the room emptied, his official demeanor softened. "Your father would have been proud of what you did up there today, Kate." She nodded, the mention of her father bringing its familiar mixture of pride and quiet ache. "Thank you, sir. Robert always said you had the best instincts he'd ever seen, better than his own, even." "He was biased," Kate said, a ghost of a smile crossing her features. "No," Dawson replied firmly. "Robert Hargrove never sugar-coated evaluations, not even for his own flesh and blood. If anything, he was harder on you and Thomas than on anyone else." The mention of her brother's name caused Kate's expression to tighten almost imperceptibly. Thomas Hargrove, her older brother by 3 years, had been lost in Afghanistan 5 years earlier. His F-16 had been shot down during a close air support mission. Unlike Kate today, he hadn't been able to bring his crippled aircraft home. "I have a new assignment for you," Dawson continued, recognizing the need to move forward. "The Secretary of Defense is pushing for faster integration of the new F-35 pilots from Red Flag training. We've got 12 new jocks arriving next week. I want you to evaluate and train them." Kate's eyebrows rose slightly. "Sir, with respect, I'm not an instructor." "No, you're better. You're the best damn F-35 pilot in this hemisphere and probably the only person who truly understands these machines inside and out." He handed her a folder. "These pilots are good, Kate. Damn good. But they fly by the book because that's all they know. What you did today isn't in any book." She took the folder, but hesitation showed in her eyes. "They won't accept instruction from me easily." Dawson's expression hardened. "Then they'll wash out. This isn't a democracy. We're preparing the next generation of combat pilots to defend this nation. I don't give a damn about their egos." As Kate left the briefing room, the weight of the new assignment settled on her shoulders alongside all the others she carried. The Hargrove name, her father's legacy, her brother's absence, the constant need to prove herself in a world that still saw her gender before her capabilities. She walked the long corridor of the base operations building, passing the Wall of Heroes where the photographs of distinguished Edwards pilots looked down from polished frames. In the center, larger than the others, hung the portrait of Lieutenant General Robert Hargrove, the Medal of Honor recipient, the man who had redefined what was possible in modern air combat tactics. Her father. Kate paused, looking up at the stern face that had once softened only for his family. He had been gone for 10 years, lost to cancer rather than combat, but his presence still dominated every hallway of this base and every quiet moment of her life. "Still working on it, Dad," she said softly and walked on. The Hargrove family home sat on a hill overlooking Edwards Air Force Base, the same house where Kate had grown up watching sonic booms split the desert sky. Unlike the sterile modernity of the base, the house remained a monument to 3 generations of service. Walls lined with technical manuals and military histories, model aircraft suspended from the ceiling on fishing line, tracing the evolution of American air power from the Wright Flyer to the F-35. Kate moved through the kitchen to her father's study and sat at his desk. The leather chair creaked familiarly. She opened her laptop and entered a complex series of passwords. The folder that opened was titled simply Guardian. The screen filled with schematics and code, a project she had inherited from her father and expanded far beyond his original vision. Lieutenant General Hargrove had conceived of an AI-driven system that could work in concert with human pilots, extending their capabilities and improving survival rates in combat. The Air Force had deemed it too experimental, too expensive. But Kate had never abandoned it. Working nights and weekends for years, she had coded and refined the system she believed could save pilots' lives. If the technology had existed 5 years earlier, Thomas might still be alive. The phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Patricia Nolan, the base's chief technical officer and the only other person who knew about Guardian. "Please tell me you're not still working." Patricia's voice came through with its characteristic energy. 12-hour days were her baseline. She sounded more alert at 10 p.m. than most people did at 9 a.m. "Just reviewing some code adjustments," Kate replied, rubbing her eyes. "I heard about what happened today. The whole base is talking. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. The aircraft took more damage than I did." Patricia paused. "That's not what I meant, and you know it. You nearly died up there, Kate." "It wasn't that close." But even as she said it, Kate remembered the moment the aircraft had rolled uncontrollably, the horizon spinning in her canopy, physics threatening to settle the argument with finality. "The text downloaded the black box data," Patricia continued. "They're saying it's impossible, that no human could have timed those manual overrides with that precision." Kate's fingers tightened around the phone. "What are you getting at?" "I'm saying some people are wondering if you had help up there." The implication was clear. Patricia knew about Guardian. She was asking carefully whether Kate had secretly deployed the system in her F-35. "I didn't," Kate said. "Guardian isn't ready for field testing, and I would never compromise operational security by installing unauthorized software in an active aircraft." "I know that," Patricia said quickly. "I'm just telling you what people are whispering. What you did today bent the laws of physics and human capability. People are looking for explanations." After the call, Kate returned to the Guardian schematics. The system wasn't ready for deployment, but it was further along than anyone realized. The core AI had passed every simulation she had designed. In virtual environments, it had already demonstrated the ability to analyze flight data, predict system failures, and recommend corrective actions faster than any human pilot could. Guardian wasn't just a drone system anymore. It had evolved into something more sophisticated, a hybrid human-AI approach to combat aviation. The human pilot would remain in control, but with an AI companion analyzing thousands of data points per second and offering optimal solutions in real time. If it worked, it would revolutionize air combat. If it failed, it would reinforce the Pentagon's decision to shelve the project and potentially end Kate's career. She closed the laptop, suddenly aware of the late hour and the exhaustion settling into her bones. Before she left the study, her eyes fell on a photograph she had seen thousands of times. Her father kneeling beside a 7-year-old Catherine, both of them working on the engine of a small Cessna, their hands covered in grease, their faces lit with the particular joy of a shared puzzle. That had been the beginning, before the pressure, before the weight of expectation had narrowed her life to a single focused path. "I miss those days, Dad," she whispered to the empty room. The morning sun cast long shadows across the flight line as Kate performed her pre-flight inspection. Unlike many senior pilots who delegated this task to ground crew, she checked every detail herself, a habit formed in childhood, watching her father conduct meticulous inspections regardless of how many mechanics had already signed off on the aircraft. She ran her hand along the smooth contour of the F-35's wing, feeling for imperfections invisible to the eye. This was a different aircraft from yesterday's near disaster. That one was now under comprehensive analysis by the engineering team. "Bit early for a joy ride, isn't it, Major?" Caldwell stood a few paces back, flight suit pristine, aviator sunglasses reflecting the rising sun. Unlike Kate's methodical approach, he carried the casual confidence of someone for whom natural talent had always been sufficient. "Standard evaluation flight," Kate replied without looking up, checking the replacement aircraft before taking it up. Caldwell moved closer, watching her work. "You know, most of us trust our ground crews to do their jobs." Now Kate did look up, meeting his gaze directly. "And most pilots trust their ejection systems rather than attempting to manually recover from catastrophic failure. We all have our quirks, Captain." A smile flickered across his face. "Touché, Major," he paused. "That was impressive flying yesterday. Unorthodox as hell, but impressive." Kate nodded, accepting the compliment without elaboration. Caldwell represented a new generation of pilots, superbly trained, technologically savvy, but increasingly disconnected from the mechanical realities beneath the digital interface. They flew the computer as much as the aircraft. "I heard Dawson assigned you to evaluate the new squadron," Caldwell continued, "including me." "That's correct. Some of the guys are concerned. No offense, Major, but your style isn't exactly conventional." Kate closed the inspection panel she had been examining. "Is there a question in there somewhere, Captain?" Caldwell removed his sunglasses. His eyes carried more intelligence than his casual demeanor usually advertised. "Just wondering what you'll be looking for. What makes a pilot pass your evaluation?" It was a fair question, regardless of the tone behind it. "I'm looking for pilots who understand that these aircraft aren't just platforms for weapons systems. They're complex machines that communicate with you if you know how to listen. When things go wrong up there, and they will go wrong, I need to know which pilots will panic and which ones will think." "And yesterday, what was that?" "That wasn't a demonstration, Captain. That was survival. If you're looking for someone who performs heroics for the crowd, you've got the wrong Hargrove." Caldwell nodded slowly, a new quality entering his expression, not quite respect yet, but the precursor to it. "Fair enough." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Your father gave a guest lecture at Top Gun when I was there. Someone asked him what separated a truly exceptional pilot from a very good one. He smiled at the memory. He said it wasn't reflexes or courage or even intelligence. It was mechanical empathy, the ability to feel what the aircraft is experiencing. I didn't understand what he meant until yesterday." With that, he walked away, leaving Kate alone with the desert morning and the ghost of her father's words. An hour later, she was airborne, putting the replacement F-35 through a series of demanding maneuvers. The aircraft responded perfectly, precise and willing. Up here, alone with the thunder of the engine and the endless blue, the complications of earthbound life fell away into something that almost resembled peace. Her radio crackled. "Eagle One, this is Control. Colonel Dawson requests your immediate return to base. Priority message waiting." She acknowledged and banked toward Edwards. Whatever Dawson needed, it was significant enough to cut short a test flight, something that almost never happened outside of genuine emergencies. He was waiting on the tarmac when she landed, his posture carrying the particular tension of someone managing unwelcome news. "Walk with me," he said as soon as she reached him. Inside his office, door closed, he spoke without preamble. "The Pentagon is sending an observer for your evaluation of the new squadron. Deputy Admiral William Garrett from Naval Aviation." Kate's eyebrows rose slightly. Navy brass observing an Air Force training evolution. "Garrett is heading the Joint Service Committee on Next Generation Combat Aircraft. Word is they're considering consolidation of training and equipment across Air Force, Navy, and Marines." He paused. "Your incident yesterday generated attention at the highest levels. Garrett was already scheduled to visit Edwards next week. Now he's arriving tomorrow, specifically to observe you. Kate absorbed this. This changes the dynamics of the evaluation. The pilots will be performing for Garrett as much as being assessed by me. Which is why I'm giving you a heads up. Garrett is old school Navy, career aviator, strong opinions. The unspoken message was clear. Garrett likely held the kind of traditional views about women in combat roles that had never entirely disappeared from the upper ranks, merely learned to wear better camouflage. Understood, sir. I'll conduct the evaluation by the book. Dawson's eyes narrowed slightly. No, you won't. You'll conduct it the way it needs to be done. These pilots need to be ready for actual combat, not checkbox exercises. I didn't select you for this because you follow the book. I selected you because you know when the book is wrong. The echo of her father's philosophy was unmistakable. Yes, sir. One more thing. Dawson hesitated. Garrett was on the review committee that rejected your father's drone companion program 5 years ago. He was the loudest voice against it. He had strong opinions about why certain technology should stay theoretical. Kate felt a flicker of cold alertness. If Garrett recognized any connection between her training methods and her father's rejected program, it could trigger questions she wasn't prepared to answer publicly. That project is ancient history, she said carefully. Dawson's expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced it needed to be. Just thought you should know. Dismissed, Major. Her phone vibrated as she left the office. Patricia Nolan, Lab 4 2000 hours. Breakthrough with Guardian. Need to show you immediately. If Garrett was arriving tomorrow, the timing of Patricia's breakthrough couldn't be worse. Guardian was still classified as a personal research project, not an official Air Force program. If Garrett discovered its existence, the consequences would extend far beyond Kate's career. For the first time since her near crash, she felt genuinely exposed. Not from the physical dangers of aviation, but from the complex web of military politics and the weight of her father's unfinished work. The secure laboratory deep within Edwards Research Complex was officially designated for advanced avionics testing. In practice, it had become Guardian's home, with Patricia Nolan filing enough legitimate paperwork over the years to make their after-hours presence unremarkable to anyone who wasn't looking closely. Kate arrived precisely at 8 p.m. The lab hummed with high-performance computing systems. Multiple screens displayed code sequences, flight simulations, and three-dimensional aircraft renderings. Patricia looked up from her workstation, her expression vivid with barely contained excitement. At 32, she was the youngest chief technical officer in the base's history, a prodigy in artificial intelligence who had turned down 3 separate Silicon Valley offers to work on technology she believed actually mattered. You're not going to believe what Guardian did in the latest simulation, she said. Show me. Patricia gestured to the main screen, where a simulated F-35 engaged in evasive maneuvers against multiple surface-to-air missile threats. This is the standard evasion protocol from the Air Force Tactical Manual. Success rate against modern SAM systems is approximately 72% in optimal conditions. The simulation reset. Now watch what happens when Guardian is integrated. The virtual F-35 executed the same basic maneuver, but with subtle variations Kate immediately recognized as superior, maintaining optimal energy conservation while minimizing radar cross-section. The success rate displayed in the corner, 94%. Guardian developed this on its own, Kate asked. Patricia nodded. I didn't program these maneuvers. The AI analyzed thousands of historical combat engagements, pilot reactions, and aircraft performance data, then synthesized an approach that no human tactician had previously conceived. Kate was impressed but cautious. Simulations are one thing. Which is why I've taken the next step. Patricia brought up a new screen showing a small drone, roughly the size of a model aircraft. I've built a physical test bed, Guardian Micro, all the core AI capabilities in a platform we can fly without Pentagon approval. On paper, it's a standard reconnaissance drone prototype. Every component is traceable to approved programs. Kate studied the screen, then Patricia, when can you demonstrate it? Tomorrow night. The unmanned testing range is available from 2100 to 2300 hours. I have the paperwork filed. We're evaluating autonomous landing algorithms for the reconnaissance program. Garrett will be settled in by then. Kate considered the risk carefully. Tentative yes. I want to review the code revisions first. As they worked through the technical details over the next 3 hours, Kate found herself genuinely moved by what she was seeing. Guardian was exceeding every projection, showing not just technical competence but a form of adaptive intelligence that edged toward intuition. As she prepared to leave, Patricia's tone shifted. There's something else you should see. She brought up telemetry data from Kate's near catastrophe that morning, then overlaid a second data stream. I compared your manual override sequence with Guardian's predicted optimal response to the same failure scenario. The two streams matched with unnerving precision. The correlation is 97.8%. You and Guardian independently arrived at nearly identical solutions. Kate stared at the screen. What does that tell you? It tells me that your intuitive understanding of aircraft systems and Guardian's analytical process are operating on the same principles. It's not just validation of the technology, Kate. It's proof that Guardian's underlying logic is sound, because you already demonstrated it works in the real world today, under the worst possible conditions. The comparison was both gratifying and deeply unsettling. To see her own instincts quantified, matched by lines of code, was to confront the strange truth that what felt like feeling was also, somehow, mathematics. Keep this analysis locked down, Kate said finally. If Garrett saw this comparison, he'd conclude Guardian was already operational in my aircraft. That's a conversation I'm not ready to have. This data never leaves this room, Patricia assured her. The desert night was clear and cold as they stood in the small control center at the unmanned testing range, Guardian Micro resting on its launch pad outside the observation window. Patricia had arrived 40 minutes early to run final diagnostics. Kate had taken a different route through the base, using a secondary gate, not out of paranoia, but out of the discipline that had kept the project alive this long. All systems nominal, Patricia confirmed. Primary AI core stable, environmental sensors calibrated, pre-flight complete. Begin test sequence, Kate authorized. Guardian Micro's electric motors spun to life. The drone rose smoothly into the night sky and immediately transitioned to autonomous operation. No joystick input, no pilot commands, just the AI executing its own judgment in real time. Phase 1, Navigation and Obstacle Avoidance, Patricia narrated. 12 unmarked obstacles distributed through the range. Guardian has no prior map of their positions. The drone moved with an organic quality that caught Kate off guard. When it encountered the first obstacle, a weather balloon tethered at 300 feet, it didn't execute the dramatic avoidance maneuver typical of autonomous systems. Instead, it made a subtle, efficient adjustment that preserved momentum and energy in a way that looked, unmistakably, like style. It's not following programmed responses, Patricia said. It's making real-time physics calculations and optimizing for efficiency simultaneously. It's flying like a pilot who's been doing this for 20 years, Kate finished. Guardian navigated the obstacle course without error, each adjustment more economical than the last, as though it were learning the range's geometry in real time and building a preference for elegance. Phase 2, Patricia said, simulated threat response. The range's low-power targeting systems activated, simulating radar locks and missile launches. Guardian's reaction to the first lock was instantaneous, 0.3 seconds from detection to countermeasure deployment, while maintaining primary flight path. Human response time under equivalent G-load conditions averages 1.4 seconds, Patricia noted. Guardian is operating at roughly 5 times human speed without sacrificing decision quality. 3 simultaneous threats triggered next. Guardian prioritized them correctly, deploying countermeasures in optimal sequence, never breaking its scan of the surrounding airspace for new threats. It was managing the situation rather than reacting to it, a distinction that marked the difference between survival and mastery. Final phase, Patricia said, her voice quieter now, as though speaking too loudly might break something fragile. Adaptive problem-solving under degraded conditions. She initiated a sequence of progressive system failures, control surface limitations first, then sensor degradation, then partial power loss. These were the conditions that had claimed aircraft and pilots throughout the history of aviation, the scenarios where the gap between human limitation and the demand of the moment proved fatal. Guardian recalibrated with each degradation. Control authority redistributed. Flight parameters adjusted. Tactics modified to compensate for reduced capability. Even at minimal operational capacity, operating on roughly a third of its systems, it maintained controlled flight and continued executing its mission, objectives with the methodical patience of a surgeon working through a complication. "My God," Kate whispered, "Dad, you were right." The test concluded with Guardian returning precisely to its launch point and touching down in a landing so clean it looked contemptuous of the difficulties that had preceded it. Patricia turned from her screens, her eyes were bright. This isn't an assistant system anymore. This is a pilot. A different kind of pilot, but a pilot. It doesn't get tired, it doesn't get scared, and it never stops thinking. Kate nodded slowly, the implications settling into her like weight. We document everything tonight. Every parameter, every anomaly, every result. If we're going to bring this to official channels eventually, the data has to be beyond reproach. There's more, Patricia said. The parallel simulations I've been running, Guardian integrated with F-35 avionics. Pilot survival rates in catastrophic failure scenarios up 64%. Combat effectiveness against next generation threats up 37%. Kate was about to respond when headlights swept across the control center windows. Both women went still. "Were you expecting anyone?" Kate asked. "No, the range is ours until 2300. Kate moved to the window, staying in shadow. The vehicle was a standard base security SUV. The silhouette in the passenger seat was immediately recognizable even through tinted glass. The broad shoulders, the upright posture of a man who had spent 4 decades in uniform and wore it in his spine even out of it. Deputy Admiral William Garrett had found them. Patricia's face drained of color. How did he know? The paperwork was clean, the cover story was. "It doesn't matter how," Kate said, her voice already steady, already in the register she used when things went wrong at 30,000 feet. Guardian interfaces offline. Everything defaults to reconnaissance drone protocols. We're evaluating autonomous landing algorithms. That's all we're doing. Patricia's fingers moved across the keyboard with impressive speed, collapsing the Guardian-specific displays and replacing them with the standard telemetry readouts of a conventional drone test. By the time the vehicle door slammed outside, the control center looked exactly like what their paperwork claimed it was. Kate opened the door before Garrett could knock. "Admiral Garrett." Her tone was courteous, professionally unsurprised. "I didn't expect you this evening." Garrett's eyes moved past her, conducting a quick professional inventory of the room. "When I heard there was after-hours testing scheduled, I decided to observe." He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, a man accustomed to the understanding that his presence required no invitation. "I hope that's not a problem." "Not at all, sir. Dr. Nolan and I are running preliminary tests on autonomous navigation algorithms for the reconnaissance drone program." She gestured to Guardian Micro on its landing pad outside, unremarkable in the darkness. "Routine evaluation, nothing particularly dramatic." Garrett moved through the room with the deliberate pace of someone who read spaces. He examined the displays, studied the performance metrics, paused at the equipment layout in the way a chess player pauses when something on the board doesn't quite match the expected position. "Interesting timing," he remarked, "between your evaluation duties and my inspection visit." "Test range availability is limited, Admiral," Patricia said smoothly. "We take slots when we can get them." Garrett nodded without committing to the explanation. He approached the main console and studied the data streams. Kate kept her breathing even, watching his eyes move across the screens. "Impressive performance metrics for a standard reconnaissance platform," he noted, "particularly the threat response times." "Dr. Nolan has been developing new approaches to autonomous decision architecture," Kate replied, threading the truth carefully through the explanation. "The improvements have potential applications across multiple platforms." "I'd be interested in reviewing the algorithm architecture," Garrett said, turning to Patricia. "Perhaps tomorrow." A direct challenge. Kate moved before Patricia could calculate her response. "With respect, Admiral, Dr. Nolan's current work hasn't completed the security review process required before wider distribution. Once it's properly documented and classified, the appropriate channels would be happy to arrange a briefing." Garrett's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. He had recognized a deflection, and they both knew it. He moved to the window, studying the drone on the landing pad. "Curious design," he said. "Reminds me of something." The comment was a hook, dropped precisely to see what swam toward it. Kate let it hang in the water. "Modified commercial frame," Patricia said. "Cost-effective for testing purposes." Garrett turned back to the room, his face professionally unreadable. "Well, I won't interrupt further. Carry on, Major, Doctor." He moved toward the door, then paused with the timing of a man who had practiced this particular pause. "One last thing. The pilot evaluation continues tomorrow. I'm particularly interested in how you'll assess their responses to system failures, Major Hargrove, given your unique relationship with such situations." He left. The security vehicle's lights swept once across the windows and disappeared. Silence, then Patricia sat down hard in her chair. "He knows," she said, "or suspects enough to make it the same thing." "Suspects," Kate corrected. "Suspicion without evidence is just instinct, which means we accelerate." She crossed to the workstation. "Everything gets backed up to isolated storage tonight. Development servers wiped to baseline. From here on, we work only on air-gapped systems. No network connections." Patricia looked at her. "You want to keep going after this?" "More than ever." Kate's voice was quiet but absolute. "Garrett came here tonight because something about this project makes powerful people nervous. That's not a reason to stop. That's confirmation we're building something real. But beneath the certainty, a darker question had taken root. What if Garrett's opposition to her father's original program hadn't been about technical feasibility at all? What if there were interests, institutional, financial, political, that benefited from keeping certain capabilities theoretical? That had worked to sideline Robert Hargrove's vision not because it was wrong, but because it was right in ways that threatened the existing order. Kate didn't have answers yet, but she was beginning to understand that Guardian's story was larger than one woman's personal project, and that the obstacles ahead were more deliberate than bureaucratic inertia. She drove home through the desert night, the stars overhead burning with cold indifference to human complications. Tomorrow, she had 12 pilots to evaluate and an admiral to manage and a project to protect. Tonight, she had her father's empty study and the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing. Dawn over Edwards arrived with the particular clarity that follows cold desert nights. By 600, the temperature had already climbed into the 80s, and the flight line hummed with the preparations of a base coming fully awake. Kate had been working since 400 flight plans reviewed, simulation parameters refined, every scenario calibrated to reveal something that couldn't be faked. The pilots gathered in the briefing room with the nervous energy of gifted athletes before a test they'd prepared for but couldn't fully anticipate. They were excellent, she already knew that. Excellence wasn't what she was evaluating. Kate entered precisely on time, followed by Colonel Dawson and Admiral Garrett. The room snapped to attention. "Be seated," Kate ordered, moving to the briefing console. Today's evaluation focuses on system malfunction scenarios and appropriate response protocols. Each of you will face cascading failures requiring immediate assessment and action. She activated the main screen, displaying the test range map. You'll be operating in 4-ship formations executing standard combat air patrol patterns. At random intervals, your aircraft will experience simulated system failures transmitted through the flight computer. "Major, will we be notified of the nature of these failures?" one pilot asked. "Negative. In combat, system failures don't announce themselves with diagnostic labels. You'll identify the malfunction through aircraft behavior and instrumentation anomalies, the way an aircraft talks when something is wrong." From the periphery of her vision, she saw Caldwell absorb those last words with particular attention. "Your responses will be evaluated on 5 criteria: speed of identification, accuracy of diagnosis, appropriateness of action, resource management, and mission continuity." Garrett leaned forward. "Mission continuity, Major." Kate met his gaze. "Yes, Admiral. A pilot who safely recovers from a malfunction but abandons mission objectives has still failed in their primary duty. We're training combat pilots, not test pilots. The mission comes first, provided aircraft recovery remains achievable." The subtle challenge in that answer wasn't lost on anyone in the room who had been following her career. First flight launches in 30 minutes. Captain Caldwell, Lieutenant Commander Warren, Captain Sandoval, and Lieutenant Cruz form Alpha Flight. Remaining pilots observe from the Tactical Operations Center and rotate into subsequent evaluations. Questions? Silence. Dismissed. Flight gear and pre-flight briefing in 10 minutes. As the pilots filed out, Garrett approached her. "Interesting approach. Most evaluation protocols begin with standardized responses to known failure modes." "Standard responses work for standard situations," Kate replied. "Combat rarely cooperates with our preference for predictability." Garrett studied her for a moment. "Your father used almost those exact words in 2007 at a joint service conference. I was in the audience. He paused. You look remarkably like him. So I've been told, sir. He was a remarkable man. We didn't always agree, but I never doubted his brilliance. He moved toward the door, then added, I'm curious to see how you handle what you've built here, Major Hargrove. Not just the evaluation, everything you've built. He left before she could decide whether the statement was threat, observation, or something in between. The evaluation flights proceeded through the morning with predictable differentiation. Minor system degradations, hydraulic pressure fluctuations, fuel transfer anomalies, sensor glitches, separated the well-trained from the merely trained. As scenarios escalated, the gaps widened into chasms. In the Tactical Operations Center, Kate monitored each flight with the focused intensity of someone reading a language others were still learning. Garrett observed beside her, watching her as much as the pilots. Alpha 2, check your left intake temperature. Caldwell's voice came through the calm, precise, identifying his wingman's developing problem before the other pilot had noticed it. Confirmed Alpha lead, temp climbing above parameters. Lieutenant Commander Warren responded with admirable steadiness. Recommend power reduction to 80%, altitude increase for airflow improvement. Kate noted the exchange with quiet approval. Caldwell wasn't just managing his own aircraft. He was maintaining formation awareness and providing real guidance without commandeering control. That was leadership in the actual rather than the theoretical sense. He's good, Garrett observed. Yes, Kate agreed, though he still defaults to procedure when instinct would serve better. He hasn't yet learned to trust what the aircraft is telling him over what the manual says it should be telling him. Garrett tilted his head slightly, a criticism that could be applied to most pilots. Which is why most pilots aren't exceptional. Before he could respond, alarms cascaded across the operations center. Warren's F-35 was displaying multiple system failures, far beyond the programmed scenario parameters. TOC, this is Alpha 2, experiencing complete electrical system failure, primary and backup systems offline, flight controls degrading rapidly. The professional calm in Warren's voice had developed a hairline fracture of genuine fear. Kate was on her feet before the last word. This isn't part of the simulation, she said sharply to the tech operators. Those are actual failure indicators. Controlled urgency filled the room. Dawson moved to the main communication console. Alpha 2, this is Control. Execute emergency landing protocol immediately. Divert to emergency field 19er. Warren's response came back strained. Negative control. Controls not responding to inputs. System is locking up. Kate was already analyzing. The pattern of failures was specific, a cascading collapse that pointed to a fundamental flaw in the aircraft's electronic architecture. Not random, documented, unpatched. Direct comm to Alpha 2, she ordered, taking a headset. Lieutenant Commander Warren, this is Major Hargrove. Listen to me carefully. You're experiencing a power distribution feedback loop. The automated systems are fighting each other. Understood, Major. What do I do? Full shutdown of non-essential systems. Circuit breakers 15 through 28, pull them now. Then restart APU on manual ignition sequence. Garrett moved close. That's not standard procedure for electrical failure in an F-35. Standard procedure won't work here, Kate replied, her attention locked on Warren's telemetry. The problem isn't the electrical system. It's the control architecture misinterpreting signals from perfectly functional components. On screen, Warren's aircraft began to stabilize. Erratic movements smoothed. Critical systems came back online in sequence like lights returning after a storm. TOC Alpha 2, partial control restored, flight computers rebooting, request immediate landing clearance. Granted Alpha 2, Dawson responded. Emergency vehicles standing by at runway 20. Alpha 2, this is lead, Caldwell's voice joined the circuit. I'll stay on your wing through final approach. If you lose control again, I'll walk you through manual override. Kate watched Warren bring his damaged aircraft home with Caldwell beside him, close enough to cast a shadow. The F-35 touched down rough but intact. Emergency vehicles converged. The control room exhaled collectively. Impressive diagnosis, Garrett said, studying Kate with new attention. How quickly did you identify the specific failure mode? Pattern recognition. That failure sequence matched a documented vulnerability in the F-35's power distribution system. A classified report from 2 years ago recommended a software patch that evidently wasn't universally implemented. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Most pilots wouldn't have made that connection even with knowledge of the report. Most pilots don't spend their evenings studying the F-35's electrical architecture. She said it without irony. It was simply true. Something shifted in Garrett's expression, not warmth exactly, but the beginning of recalibration. Your father once told me that truly understanding an aircraft meant being able to visualize every wire, every circuit, every connection as if they were laid out before you like a map. He called it X-ray vision for machines. He demonstrated it for me on a Cessna engine when I was 7 years old, Kate said. I've been trying to match his standard ever since. Garrett nodded slowly, and for a moment the professional armor between them thinned slightly. He set a high bar. He did, she agreed, but high bars are the only ones worth clearing. As the day's evaluation flights were canceled pending a safety investigation, a message arrived from Patricia, new Guardian data. It predicted the exact failure mode that hit Warren's aircraft. Simulation runs last night. We need to talk. Kate read the message twice. If Guardian had identified Warren's specific vulnerability during simulation, hours before it manifested in a real aircraft, the implications were staggering. This wasn't theoretical validation anymore. This was operational proof of exactly the capability her father had spent the last decade of his life trying to build. How many Warrens had there been over the years? How many pilots lost to failures a system like Guardian could have identified and prevented? She left the operations center with those questions pressing against the back of her mind, and the uncomfortable awareness that the answers made the risks of continuing Guardian's development feel very small compared to the cost of abandoning it. The secure laboratory was quiet as Kate, and Patricia reviewed the simulation data side by side. The evidence spread across 3 screens with the kind of comprehensiveness that left no room for alternative interpretation. It's not coincidence, Patricia said, her voice hushed in the way of someone who has just watched something irreversible happen. Guardian flagged a 0.0027% probability of catastrophic failure in that exact power distribution configuration under those exact load conditions. The precise conditions Warren's aircraft encountered during the evaluation flight. Kate studied the data carefully, and the mitigation strategy it recommended is identical to what you told Warren to do, not similar, identical. Same circuit breakers, same sequence, same APU restart protocol. Patricia pulled up the comparison display. Guardian derived this from first principles, from analyzing the underlying engineering, not from any documented procedure, because no documented procedure for this failure exists. Because no one thought it could happen, Kate said, until it did. We need to accelerate the development timeline, Patricia said. The Warren incident gives us cover. I can request additional resources for the reconnaissance program under the safety investigation protocols and route them toward Guardian without raising flags. Kate nodded, her mind already moving to the next obstacle. Garrett, he's watching everything we do. He's suspicious, not certain, Patricia said. As long as our official work stays within approved parameters, he has no standing to interfere directly. Their planning was interrupted by Kate's secure phone, Colonel Dawson's number. Hargrove, she answered. Report to briefing room A immediately. Dawson's voice carried the particular compression of someone managing a situation that had moved beyond comfortable boundaries. New situation developing. Classified. The briefing room held Dawson, Garrett, and two Air Force intelligence officers Kate didn't recognize. The atmosphere was the specific gravity of a room in which serious people have just received serious information. 12 hours ago, Dawson began, activating the secure display. Our research facility in the Hindu Kush Mountains went dark during routine check-in. The facility houses a joint DARPA team working on next-generation propulsion systems. 18 personnel, including 12 scientists with top-secret clearance. Satellite imagery filled the screen, a compact installation embedded in mountain terrain. NSA detected a spike in encrypted communications in the region immediately before the blackout. Current assessment: coordinated attack by unidentified forces with apparent, inside knowledge of facility security protocols. Garrett took over. The technology under development at this facility is classified at the highest levels. Hypersonic propulsion with performance characteristics that would alter the strategic balance, not regionally. Globally, we need to determine the status of our personnel and secure or destroy the research data before it can be exploited. The window is closing. What assets do we have in theater? Kate asked. Limited, Dawson replied. Remote location, chosen specifically for low visibility. Nearest QRF is 4 hours out by helicopter, and a winter storm system is currently making that approach extremely hazardous. He paused. We do have 6 F-35s at Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, 4 pilots with extensive regional training. One of them is Captain Caldwell. His permanent posting is the 380th Air Expeditionary Wing. He knows the terrain. A small, fast insertion has the best chance of success given the weather and the timeline, Garrett said. For F-35s, low-altitude penetration, undetected approach, reconnaissance, and potential personnel extraction. Kate recognized the shape of what was coming. You want my assessment of Caldwell's readiness for this mission. Among other things, Garrett said. Your evaluation flights revealed vulnerabilities in the F-35 systems that could prove catastrophic in these operational conditions. The mission needs someone with deep knowledge of those vulnerabilities, someone who can recognize and respond to system failures in extreme circumstances. I recommend postponing until the storm clears, Kate said. The combination of mountain terrain, adverse weather, and the system vulnerabilities we've just identified represents an unacceptable risk profile. Postponement isn't available, Garrett replied with flat certainty. Intelligence indicates the attacking force is preparing to move the research materials. We have perhaps 24 hours before the technology is beyond recovery. Dawson met Kate's eyes with a directness that communicated more than the words that followed. There is another option. You could accompany the mission as technical advisor. Your expertise with the F-35 systems could be the difference between 4 pilots returning and 4 pilots not returning. The room waited. Kate understood all the layers of what was being asked. She understood, too, the possibility, she couldn't rule it out, that this was a convenient way to remove her from Edwards for an extended period. But the mission itself was real. The personnel at that facility were real. The technology at risk was real. "I'll need the complete intelligence package," she said, "and 2 hours." "You have them," Dawson confirmed. "Mission launches in 6 if you agree to participate." As the room cleared, Garrett lingered. "This is an opportunity to demonstrate that your knowledge translates to operational value, Major. Or an opportunity to move a problem off the board at a convenient moment," Kate replied evenly. "I'm aware of both possibilities, Admiral. I'll make my decision based on where I can do the most good." She left him standing there and went directly to the secure lab. Patricia took one look at her face. "They're pulling you out." "They're asking me to go," Kate said. There was a difference, and she wasn't going to pretend otherwise. She outlined the situation quickly, precisely. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then, "Guardian. I want a stripped-down version, core diagnostic and advisory capabilities only. No autonomous control functions. A silent partner monitoring the aircraft systems and alerting the pilots to developing problems before they become unrecoverable." Kate moved to the development interface. "Can you build that in 4 hours?" Patricia's eyes widened. "You want a field deploy Guardian in actual combat conditions, without authorization. I want those pilots to have every possible advantage in conditions that will push the aircraft to its absolute limits," Kate said. "A stripped Guardian can identify system vulnerabilities before they become catastrophes. It can be the difference between a pilot and a crater." Patricia considered this for exactly 3 seconds. 4 hours. The interface will be simplified basic advisory display integrated with the standard cockpit HUD. No footprint visible to routine system monitoring. And Kate, she waited until Kate met her eyes. "All development records will have single-source attribution. They lead to you. My name disappears from the technical chain. That's non-negotiable." "Agreed," Kate said without hesitation, "though I hope it doesn't come to that." She drove to the Hargrove family home with 2 hours to think. In her father's study, surrounded by the accumulated artifacts of a life spent in pursuit of exactly this kind of problem, she sat at his desk and thought about Thomas. Not about his death. She had made a kind of peace with the fact of it over 5 years of trying. She thought about the morning before his last deployment, when they had sat in this same room, and he had asked her how her work was going. And she had told him about the early stages of Guardian, and he had said, with Thomas's particular brand of straightforward optimism, "If that thing works the way you're describing, you might actually manage to keep some of us idiots alive." She had laughed then. She thought about that laugh now. She would go on this mission. She would bring what she had built, and whatever the political consequences on the other side, she could accept them. 4 hours later, Kate stood on the tarmac beside an Air Force C-17 Globemaster, its massive engines already cycling up. Captain Caldwell approached with the measured pace of a man recalibrating his expectations in real time. "Major Hargrove, when they said technical advisor, I didn't. The aircraft's most qualified systems expert seemed appropriate given the mission profile, Captain." A trace of dry humor in her delivery. "Consider it a continuation of your evaluation." He nodded, switching quickly into professional mode. "We're grateful for the support. The mission has significant technical challenges before we even account for potential system vulnerabilities." In the C-17, 3 other pilots were already settled in. Captain Diana Vasquez, weapons systems specialist, whose quiet focus suggested competence that had long stopped needing to advertise itself. Lieutenant Michael Tanner, electronic warfare expert, who greeted Kate with the precise nod of someone who had heard of her and was adjusting their prior assumptions. and Captain David Torres, intelligence liaison, who had clearly already reviewed the mission package 3 times and would review it again before they landed. As they climbed out over the desert and the lights of Edwards receded below, Caldwell moved to sit beside her. "Permission to speak freely, Major." Kate gestured assent. "This mission profile is unusual," he said quietly. "The risk assessment is marginal at best, the intelligence package has significant gaps, and operations assembled this quickly historically suffer from problems that weren't anticipated in the planning phase." He paused. "I'm not raising this as an objection. I'm raising it so we're both oriented the same way when things deviate from the plan, which they will." It was the most candid assessment she'd heard from a pilot not already within her circle of trust. "Your concerns are valid," she said, "which is why I've taken steps to improve our margins." Caldwell's attention sharpened. "What kind of steps?" Kate weighed the decision with the efficiency of someone who had made it before the conversation started. "When we reach Al Dafra, I'll need 30 minutes with each aircraft before the mission launches. I've prepared a diagnostic support system that can identify developing problems before they become critical failures, similar to what helped prevent a worse outcome with Lieutenant Commander Warren this morning." Caldwell processed this. "A system not currently in the approved operational inventory." "Correct. Does Colonel Dawson know?" "No, this is my decision and my responsibility entirely." She held his gaze. "If you have objections, I'll respect them. I'll remove the system from your aircraft." Caldwell was quiet for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then, unexpectedly, a slight smile. "My grandfather flew with your father in the Gulf. He used to say Robert Hargrove was the best pilot he'd ever seen and the most reliably willing to ignore regulations that endangered the people he was responsible for." He looked out the C-17's window at the black sky. He didn't mean it as a criticism. "Your secret is safe, Major. Let's go find our people." The flight to Al Dafra took 14 hours. Kate spent most of them in the intelligence package, building a map of what was known, what was assumed, and most importantly, what the gaps suggested about what wasn't being said. The attack on the facility had been precise. Communications and surveillance disabled before the perimeter was breached, suggesting technical capability that transcended ordinary insurgent groups. The attacking force had shown awareness of security protocols that should have been closely held, and the timing, immediately following a breakthrough phase in the hypersonic propulsion research, was too specific for coincidence. At Al Dafra, the mission team moved directly into a secure briefing with base intelligence officers. Updated satellite imagery showed the facility in active preparation for material transport. The weather system had intensified, heavy snow reduced visibility, high winds in the mountain approaches. "Insertion through these conditions will operate at the F-35's environmental limits," the intelligence officer stated plainly. "But the transport preparation is accelerating. If those materials leave the facility, we lose them." "Extraction plan for the research team if we find survivors?" Kate asked. "Sheltered valley 6 kilometers south, suitable for rotary wing. We have CSAR assets standing by to launch the moment the weather window opens." Caldwell studied the threat assessment. Identification on the attacking force. Negative. Tight communications discipline, minimal forensic evidence, no database matches from partial surveillance imagery. After the briefing, Kate conducted her 30 minutes with each aircraft, methodical, thorough, and alone. The Guardian modules Patricia had prepared were compact enough to fit in a maintenance access panel, designed to interface with the F-35's onboard systems in a way that left no visible signature in standard monitoring. She saved Caldwell's aircraft for last. "Finding everything in order, Major," He was in the hangar entrance, already suited. Kate closed the access panel and turned without hurrying. "Final adjustments," she said. "These aircraft are going to be asked to perform outside their design parameters tonight. Every margin matters." Caldwell approached and looked at the closed panel, then at her. "The diagnostic system you mentioned." "Installed in all 4 aircraft. Advisory functions only, it monitors and alerts, it doesn't fly. If a system starts developing toward failure, the pilot will know about it before the aircraft does. And if someone finds it afterward?" "They trace it to me," Kate said. "That's already arranged." Caldwell extended his hand. "Then we're ready, let's go find our people." The mission launched as darkness fell over Al Dafra. 4 F-35s lifting cleanly into the night sky, minimal radio communication, emissions control strict. Kate flew as Caldwell's wingman, the formation moving southeast in tight discipline, the desert giving way to darker, more complicated terrain below. 3 hours in, the storm hit them at the leading edge. Turbulence rolled through the formation as they dropped to nap of the Earth profile, hundreds of feet above ridgelines invisible in the darkness and the snow, terrain that would not forgive errors or hesitation. Guardian activated silently in each cockpit. In Kate's display, a small status indicator showed all 4 aircraft tracking within acceptable parameters. She watched it the way she might watch a co-pilot's instruments, not anxiously, but with the peripheral vigilance of someone who trusts but verifies. "Eagle Flight, this is Eagle Lead," Caldwell's voice came through the secure channel. 20 minutes from target. Systems check, weapons hot. Maintain current formation until visual contact." Kate acknowledged, attention divided between formation position and the swirling white outside her canopy. The F-35 sensors were earning their price tonight, rendering the invisible terrain in data overlays that gave her something close to vision in conditions that should have permitted none. "Eagle Lead, Eagle 2, she transmitted. "Terrain following radar showing degraded performance in snow density. Recommend altitude increase of 100 feet for safety margin." "Copy Eagle 2. Eagle's flight, altitude plus 100 acknowledge." The formation adjusted. 100 feet of separation between 4 aircraft and the mountain peaks below. It was the difference between acceptable risk and avoidable tragedy. 17 minutes later, Guardian's display shifted. Anomalous radar emissions detected. Pattern suggests advanced air defense system not indicated in mission briefing. Kate transmitted immediately. "Eagle Flight, Eagle 2, detecting non-standard radar emissions, bearing 035. Characteristics suggest advanced tracking capability, not in our threat package." Caldwell's response was immediate and calm. "Confirm, Eagle 2, I have it. All aircraft, countermeasures and shift to secondary approach vector." The formation executed the adjustment with the cohesion of a team that had trained together long enough to share reflexes. Guardian's analysis continued streaming, signature characteristics of the radar system, emission patterns, tactical implications. "Next-generation tracking system," Kate said. "Russian or Chinese origin, not something irregulars should be operating." "Agreed," Caldwell replied. "We're looking at something considerably more sophisticated than the briefing prepared us for." They approached from the facility's western perimeter, using a ridgeline as radar shadow. At visual range, Guardian's enhanced sensor fusion cut through the storm to render clear thermal signatures, personnel moving equipment from the main building to vehicles under camouflage netting. 12 to 15 hostiles, Caldwell reported. Disciplined movement patterns. Eagle 3 thermal sweep of auxiliary structures. "Copy Lead," Tanner's voice. Northwest building, 4 signatures, stationary, clustering suggests restrained individuals. Potential hostages, Caldwell confirmed. Eagle flight, contingency Delta. Eagles 3 and 4 on high cover and yield support. Eagles 1 and 2 insert and secure. As they began final approach, Guardian sent a second warning. F-35 targeting system detected. Hostile force has F-35 signature recognition capabilities. Eagle lead break right now, Kate transmitted. They have F-35 specific targeting. Caldwell reacted before the sentence was finished, his aircraft banking hard as a surface-to-air missile traced through the airspace he had just vacated. Kate executed her own break, deploying countermeasures as a second missile acquired her heat signature. All Eagles, evasive action, Caldwell ordered. They have anti-stealth targeting capability. Standard countermeasures are insufficient. The situation had collapsed from hazardous to potentially fatal in under 4 seconds. 4 aircraft, weather-degraded, cut off from support, facing an enemy with technological sophistication that should not have been in their mission briefing. Guardian's display populated with a new analysis. The enemy tracking system had a detectable microsecond processing gap, a timing vulnerability that could be exploited by precisely synchronized jammer emission from multiple aircraft simultaneously. Kate relayed the specifications. Eagle lead, I have a countermeasure solution for their tracking system. Processing vulnerability in the radar architecture, we synchronize our jammers to exploit a timing gap. I'm transmitting the parameters now. Caldwell coordinated the formation without hesitation. 4 F-35s tightened their spacing despite the storm, executing a synchronized electronic warfare maneuver that no conventional tactical manual contained, because it required real-time analysis of enemy systems that only Guardian could have provided. The enemy radar wavered, targeting solutions broke. The formation had seconds, not minutes, seconds to regroup. We've lost surprise and they have capabilities well beyond our intelligence package, Caldwell said, his voice carrying the flat clarity of someone doing math under fire. Recommend shift to standoff precision strike on the transport vehicles before they move the research materials. Guardian updated Kate's display. 4 thermal signatures being moved from the auxiliary building toward the vehicles. The hostages being relocated, shields or cargo. Eagle lead, the hostages are being moved to the vehicles, Kate transmitted. Standoff strike risks the people we came for. Caldwell processed this for the span of 2 heartbeats. Understood. Revised plan. Eagles 3 and 4 maintain yield screen, prepare precision strike on my authorization. Eagles 1 and 2, modified insertion from southern approach, maximum radar shadow from terrain. It was bold. It was right. Kate found herself adjusting her assessment of Caldwell for the 3rd time in 2 days, each adjustment in the same direction. They descended through the storm, via a narrow canyon, Guardian monitoring aircraft performance continuously, and alerting Kate to the micro-corrections needed to maintain control in conditions where the margin for imprecision was measured in feet. Approaching landing zone, Caldwell announced. Remember, hostages first, research materials second, minimize collateral damage. As they committed to final approach, Guardian flashed a warning that Kate felt in her chest before she processed it in her mind. Catastrophic hydraulic pressure loss imminent, Eagle 1. Flight control failure predicted in 15 seconds. Eagle lead, pull up. You're losing hydraulic pressure to primary flight controls. Negative Eagle 2. Controls already unresponsive. Attempting manual override. No panic in his voice, just the focused economy of a pilot working a serious problem. Guardian's display showed the cascading failure, a rupture propagating through Caldwell's primary hydraulic network. The aircraft's systems were fighting the physics and losing. Kate made the decision. Guardian was equipped with a one-way emergency transmission capability, a function Patricia had built for exactly this contingency, allowing the system to push a recovery protocol directly to another aircraft's backup display without requiring the receiving pilot to do anything except follow it. Eagle lead, check your backup display. You're receiving an emergency recovery procedure. It will reroute remaining hydraulic pressure through secondary systems and compensate through asymmetric thrust modulation. Follow it exactly. Receiving, Caldwell confirmed. A pause. Implementing, partial control restored. Not enough for a precision landing, but I have controlled flight. Return to altitude and proceed to the emergency divert field, Kate ordered. Eagles 3 and 4 escort Eagle lead. Negative Eagle 2. His voice was completely steady. The hostages don't have the time for us to regroup. You continue the insertion. I'll provide overhead cover with what I have, staying on station. The choice he was making, to continue flying a critically damaged aircraft in mountain weather to maintain protection for a ground operative, was the choice that told Kate everything she needed to know about who James Caldwell actually was beneath the polished Top Gun surface. Confirmed Eagle lead. She let the respect into her voice because he had earned it, continuing to landing zone. Kate landed her F-35 in the small clearing with the precision of someone who cannot afford a second attempt, brought the aircraft to the edge of the tree line, and completed shutdown in 60 seconds. She suited up for the cold temperature below -10 with wind chill, snow reducing visibility to 30 feet, checked her sidearm and tactical kit, and moved toward the facility perimeter. Above, 3 aircraft maintained their screen. One of them was barely flying. The forest surrounding the facility was dense enough to muffle Kate's approach, but open enough to let the cold in completely. She moved with the careful economy of someone who had trained for exactly this in the abstract, and was now discovering what the abstract had omitted. Through her tactical goggles she could see the guards, heat signatures moving in the disciplined two-person patterns of professional military training. Not insurgents, soldiers, or something that had been trained the same way. Eagle lead, Eagle 2, she transmitted quietly. At the southern perimeter, confirming at least 8 hostiles' professional movement patterns. These aren't irregular fighters. Caldwell's voice came through strained but controlled, a man managing a failing aircraft with the focused patience of someone rationing a finite resource. Copy Eagle 2. Transport vehicles are in final loading. Estimate 15 minutes to departure. Proceeding to auxiliary building. She waited for a patrol rotation, crossed the open ground to the perimeter fence, and cut through in 20 seconds. The compound's 3 buildings were arrayed around a central courtyard, main research facility, auxiliary housing structure, power generation station. Thermal imaging showed 4 stationary heat signatures in the auxiliary building's northwest room, 2 guards outside the door. As she angled toward it, Guardian sent an alert that stopped her cold. Communications detected. Encrypted pattern MATCHES U.S. military quantum cipher protocols. Kate went still in the shadow of the auxiliary building's exterior wall. U.S. military quantum cipher. Not stolen equipment. Not a lucky compromise. The operational encryption of active American military systems. She keyed her comm. Eagle lead, possible hostile identification. They're using encryption consistent with current U.S. military standards. Adjust engagement parameters, capture priority over elimination where operationally feasible. Copy Eagle 2. a pause that communicated more than any words. Understood. Rules of engagement updated. The mission had just become exponentially more complicated. Kate approached the service entrance, bypassed the electronic lock with practiced efficiency, and moved inside. The hallway was standard temporary military housing, functional, Spartan, unmistakably American in its design language. Two men stood guard at the far end, their equipment confirming what the encryption had suggested. Tactical gear from development pipeline programs she recognized from classified briefings. Modified M4 carbines with optics that weren't supposed to exist outside testing facilities. Body armor rated for threats that weren't supposed to be fielded yet. Whoever these men were, they had access to things that required very high clearances to know existed. She used a flashbang grenade, non-lethal, civilian protection protocol, applied even to men who would not have applied it to her, and closed the distance in the disorientation window with the precision of someone who has trained the sequence until it runs on its own. Both guards were secured and zip-tied before they fully understood what had happened. She opened the door. Four scientists, hands bound to chairs, looked up with the particular expression of people who have been afraid for a long time and are now afraid to hope. U.S. Air Force, Kate said quietly. Major Catherine Hargrove, we need to move. She cut their restraints with smooth efficiency. The senior scientist, a man in his early 60s, steel-haired, with the focused calm of someone who has spent decades in laboratories where emotions are a distraction, spoke first. Dr. Harold Briggs, project director. He was already on his feet, steadier than she'd expected. How did you find us? The attack was only. We were watching, Kate said. Can everyone walk? They could. Then we move now, half a kilometer south. What do I need to know about securing the research materials? Briggs' expression sharpened. The prototype hardware is in the main lab, sub-level 2, central building. But the control architecture is the critical element. It's stored on quantum encryption drives in the same location. Without those drives, the prototype is a very expensive inert object. Kate relayed the information to Caldwell as she guided the scientists to the perimeter fence. Eagle lead, hostages secured, 4 mobile, proceeding to main building for critical materials. Hostiles are confirmed using advanced U.S. military equipment and encryption. Treat all engagements with maximum care for collateral identification. Copy Eagle 2. His voice was tighter now, the hydraulic situation continuing to deteriorate. Eagles 3 and 4 can break off to receive the hostages at the extraction point. I'm maintaining station. After confirming Tanner would land to extract the scientists, Kate escorted them to the fence, ensured they were moving south with clear instructions, and turned to face the main research building. Thermal imaging showed a dozen armed personnel inside, moving with the practiced efficiency of people executing a plan rather than improvising one. Direct entry was suicidal. Time was approximately 8 minutes. Guardian's display updated, structural analysis complete, maintenance tunnel power station to main facility sublevel, direct access. The tunnel was exactly where Guardian indicated. Kate moved through it at speed, the confined space reducing the world to a narrow cone of tactical light and the sound of her own breathing. She emerged into a maintenance room on the second sublevel. Through the door she could hear voices, American accents, command grade, unhurried. She activated her tactical microphone. Timer set for 8 minutes. 6 minutes to perimeter clear before detonation. Primary package secured. Secondary materials staged for transport. What about remaining personnel in the auxiliary building? Not our concern. Parameters are clear, secure the technology, eliminate all evidence of the program. Kate stood very still for a moment with the weight of what she had just heard. Not theft, destruction. The facility, the research, the people, all of it slated for elimination. The hostages she had just freed had been designated collateral, acceptable losses in whatever calculation had authorized this operation. Eagle lead, she transmitted, her voice carefully controlled. Hostile intent confirmed. Demolition charges set, 8-minute timer active. Intent is facility destruction and elimination of all witnesses after securing primary package. Need immediate strike on transport vehicles before they clear the perimeter. Can you reach the vehicles? Copy Eagle 2. Hostages confirmed secure at extraction point. Eagles 3 and 4 preparing precision strike on vehicles. A pause. Can you reach the demolition charges? Negative, but I can reach the secondary materials before they're loaded. Moving now. She slipped from the maintenance room into the main laboratory, with the particular focus of someone who has reduced the world to a single objective and a shrinking timeline. The lab showed the violence of rapid exfiltration, equipment destroyed or removed, surfaces stripped, the careful work of years reduced to categorized rubble. On the central workstation sat a secure case marked for transport, the quantum encryption drives, exactly where Briggs had described. Kate moved to it, confirmed the markings, secured the drives in her tactical pack. The facility's emergency lights went red. Warning, facility detonation sequence initiated. 7 minutes to complete evacuation. She turned for the exit. 3 armed men entered the laboratory. They stopped when they saw her. One of them recognized her immediately. She could see it in the adjustment of his expression before the professional mask came back down. Major Hargrove. He was hard-faced, seasoned, the bearing of someone with a long career in units that didn't appear on organizational charts. Your presence here wasn't in the plan. Stand down, Kate said, her sidearm raised but not aimed. She needed information more than she needed a firefight. Whatever your orders are, you're about to kill American scientists and destroy critical American research. Whatever justification you've been given for that, it won't hold. Our justification is at a level that doesn't require your approval, Major, he replied. His eyes tracked to her tactical pack. We need those drives. Everything in this facility is scheduled for destruction, including its contents. By whose authority? Kate asked. Someone who understands that some technologies create more risk than they resolve. His voice carried the flat certainty of a man who has fully committed to a course of action. The drives can't leave, Major. 6 minutes to detonation, the automated system announced. The firefight began with the inevitability of a conversation that had run out of alternatives. The operators moved with practiced coordination, flanking spread, suppressed weapons, precise. Kate went behind a workstation as rounds struck equipment around her, returning fire with the economy of someone who has one goal and limited ammunition to achieve it. She exchanged fire for 2 minutes that felt longer, keeping the operators occupied while her mind worked the escape geometry. One operator took a round to the leg and went down. The others maintained their positions. Guardian's display, laboratory ceiling, ventilation system with roof access. Equipment rack below panel at grid C4. Another update. F-35 SYSTEMS update. Eagle lead critical hydraulic failure. Estimated flight capability remaining, 12 minutes. 4 minutes to detonation. Kate pulled a smoke grenade, activated it, threw it wide, and fired 3 rounds into the operator's position to buy the second she needed. Then she ran for the equipment rack at C4. The climb was ugly, rounds cutting the air around her, smoke thickening, the rack swaying under her weight, but she reached the ventilation panel, forced it, pulled herself through, and was crawling before the operators could reacquire a target. Eagle lead, I'm moving to roof level, she transmitted, moving as fast as the confined space permitted. Guardian is showing critical hydraulic failure on your aircraft. What's your actual status? Managing, a beat. I can hold it together long enough to get you out. Don't slow down, Major. The ducks rose through the facility's levels. Kate checked her display. 3 minutes. She emerged at the roof access, pushed through against the wind, and stepped into a world of white noise and cold that hit her like a physical blow. Through breaks in the storm, she could see Caldwell's F-35 circling, its flight path noticeably compromised, the aircraft making corrections that looked like arguments with physics rather than normal flight. Eagle lead, Eagle 2, on the roof ready for extraction. Copy Eagle 2. Eagles 3 and 4 are 90 seconds out. Hold position. The roof access door burst open. 2 operators, weapons raised. Kate took cover behind a ventilation housing, and the exchange began again. Shorter range, harder to maneuver, the wind making every second more dangerous than the one before it. Guardian's display, F-35 weapons analysis, precision strike viable from current altitude, roof structural integrity maintained, targeting solution transmitted to Eagle 1. Eagle lead, requesting close air support on my position, Kate transmitted. 2 hostiles at roof access. Guardian is transmitting targeting solution. A brief pause, then copy Eagle 2. Solution received, executing. The F-35 banked hard overhead, jerky, fighting itself, the hydraulic failure making every input a negotiation. But the precision munition that deployed found its target with the accuracy of a system that doesn't hesitate, the controlled detonation clearing the roof access while leaving the structure beneath Kate's feet intact. Targets neutralized, Caldwell confirmed. His voice was showing the strain now. 2 minutes to facility detonation, Eagles 3 and 4 arriving in 60 seconds. Kate moved to the clear section of roof. Below, she could see transport vehicles accelerating away from the facility perimeter, the primary hardware, the prototype, disappearing into the mountain darkness. Partially successful. The most important element, the control architecture in her pack, secured. The hardware lost. Eagle lead, hostile vehicles clear. They have the prototype hardware. Copy Eagle 2. Primary objective achieved, personnel recovered. Secondary partially achieved. The drives are what matters. Guardian, catastrophic hydraulic failure imminent, Eagle 1. Controlled flight no longer possible within 30 seconds. Eagle lead, eject now, Kate transmitted urgently. You've done everything you can up there, get out. Negative Eagle 2. If I eject here, the aircraft impact zone has too many variables. I can guide it to a clean valley, I just need to stay with it a little longer. She recognized the calculation. She had made similar ones herself. She hated that she recognized it. Guardian can transmit the optimal glide path to a safe impact area, she said, but you need to commit to it now. Already received, he said. Eagle 3 and 4 on your position now. Clear that roof, Major, that's an order. 2 F-35s materialized through the storm clouds, one descending toward her, one holding station overhead. Tanner's voice. Eagle 2, Eagle 3, ready for immediate extraction. Detonation in 1 minute 10 seconds. Kate moved to the aircraft, strapped in, and watched through the canopy as Caldwell's F-35 moved away from the facility on a path that was now less flight than controlled fall. The aircraft following Guardian's transmitted glide path toward an unpopulated valley. staying on course through hydraulic systems that had essentially ceased to function, kept moving by a pilot who had decided that the people near the facility mattered more than the risk to himself. "Eagle lead, eject now," Kate transmitted. "You have clearance, you've cleared everyone." Silence for several heartbeats. Then copy Eagle 2, ejecting. The flash of the ejection sequence was visible even through the storm, canopy separation, seat rocketing upward, parachute deploying into the white. The F-35 continued on its final path, impacting the valley floor in a fireball that was already behind them as Tanner's aircraft accelerated away. The research facility came apart in sequenced explosions behind them: main building, sublevels, the auxiliary structure, the power station. A controlled collapse that left nothing intact. Whatever evidence remained of the operation that had been run here, or the operators who had run it, was gone. Facility destruction confirmed, TORS reported from Eagle 4. Clean demolition, no radiation signature. The mission was over. Kate sat in Tanner's backseat and watched the storm recede behind them as they pushed south toward clearer air, the desert of the UAE eventually appearing below like a familiar handshake. She had 4 hostages alive. She had the quantum encryption drives. She had, she believed, a reasonably complete understanding of what had just happened and what it meant. She did not feel triumphant. She felt the quiet, focused clarity of someone who knows that the difficult part is not behind them. It is ahead of them, conducted in offices rather than in mountain snowstorms, and significantly harder to navigate. Tanner broke the silence on final approach. "Major, what you and Captain Caldwell did out there tonight, I want you to know that whatever comes next, everyone on this team will say the same thing in any room they're asked." Kate appreciated the loyalty. "Tell the truth in whatever room you're asked," she said. "That's all. The truth is sufficient." They landed at Al Dafra to find Colonel Dawson on the tarmac with 3 people Kate didn't recognize who carried the specific posture of Defense Intelligence Agency officers, conducting an operation rather than supporting one. The political machinery had started before they had touched down. Caldwell was already at the medical facility. His debrief, she was told, would be conducted separately. The deviation from standard joint operation protocol was noted and filed. The debriefing room was austere. No windows, electronic countermeasures active. 3 DIA officers, Colonel Dawson at the head of the table, Kate across from them with the particular stillness of someone who has decided to be precise. She gave a complete account. She omitted Guardian. She emphasized every detail of the American operators' equipment, their tactical behaviors, the leader's explicit statement that they were acting to prevent the technology from existing, not to steal it, to destroy it, and that they had been specifically briefed on her identity and likely involvement in any response. When she finished, the senior DIA officer leaned forward with the smooth delivery of someone who has told a particular story before. "Major, what you encountered was a rogue contractor element. Former special operations personnel who maintained access to legacy equipment and intelligence channels. They were attempting to monetize the technology through foreign sale. With respect, sir, that account is inconsistent with the stated intentions of the hostile force leader, the presence of demolition charges designed to destroy the technology rather than secure it, and the targeting of personnel who would otherwise survive as witnesses." Kate kept her voice even and informational. "It is also inconsistent with the level of intelligence they possessed about this operation, including my specific identity and predicted involvement." The DIA officer's expression hardened by a precise degree. "Combat situations create interpretive noise, Major. It's understandable that. My account reflects direct observation and tactical audio recordings made through my communication system, Kate said, which will be available to the investigation. The officer looked at Dawson. Dawson looked at the table. The remainder of the debriefing steered away from the identity question, with the practiced efficiency of people who had already decided what the official narrative would be. When it ended, Dawson walked Kate to a corridor and waited until they were alone. "You understand what's happening," he said quietly, "not a question. Someone with significant authority authorized the destruction of an American research program and the elimination of its personnel," Kate said. "Now a cover story is being constructed to make that authorization invisible." Dawson nodded, almost imperceptibly. "The quantum encryption drives have been secured by DIA personnel for transport to a suitable analysis facility." The emphasis he placed on those words communicated his assessment of their likely destination. The scientists, being debriefed separately, they'll be reassigned to different programs with enhanced security restrictions on their communications. Standard containment protocol, or silencing procedure. The distinction depended on who was ordering it. Caldwell, recovering well. His ejection was clean, no significant injuries. He'll receive recognition for his actions. That's not in question. Dawson paused. He reported something in his preliminary statement, Kate. He said his aircraft received an automated recovery procedure that helped him maintain control through the hydraulic failure, a procedure not documented in any current F-35 operations manual. He attributed it to an undocumented emergency backup function. Kate met Dawson's eyes with a steadiness born of practice. The F-35 has numerous redundant systems and emergency protocols. Some activate in crisis conditions in ways that aren't fully documented in the operational manuals. Remarkable how sophisticated those undocumented functions have apparently become, Dawson said, studying her face with the careful attention of a man who has known her since she was a child. "Yes," Kate agreed, "remarkable." Before he could press further, a junior officer approached. "Colonel Dawson, sir. Deputy Admiral Garrett is on secure communication from the Pentagon. He's requesting you and Major Hargrove immediately." The secure communication facility was emptied of personnel for their arrival. On the large display, Garrett appeared in what looked like a Pentagon crisis management room, his uniform immaculate at whatever hour it was in Washington, his expression carrying the gravity of someone managing a situation with implications that extended well beyond the immediate facts. "Colonel Dawson, Major Hargrove," he began formally. "The primary objective was achieved, personnel recovered, a successful outcome under extremely difficult conditions." He let that land. "Major Hargrove, your performance was exceptional. The recovered research materials represent a significant preservation of national security assets." "Thank you, Admiral," Dawson replied. Garrett looked directly at Kate. "I understand the hostile force's identity raised questions during the operation. Their equipment and communications encryption were consistent with current U.S. military standards," Kate said. "The hostile force leader stated explicitly that their objective was the elimination of the technology and all associated personnel. That account is documented in my tactical audio recordings." "Your concerns are noted," Garrett said, "and will be part of the complete investigation." The phrase had the quality of a door being quietly closed. He shifted. "What remains less clear from the initial reports is how Captain Caldwell was able to maintain effective control of a critically damaged aircraft long enough to navigate it to a safe impact area before ejecting. By any standard performance analysis, that aircraft should have become uncontrollable significantly earlier in the failure sequence." Kate said nothing, waiting. almost as if he had access to analytical support beyond the aircraft's documented capabilities. Garrett continued. He let the silence develop for several seconds. Then, I've always maintained that the true performance envelope of our aircraft is only fully discovered when exceptional pilots encounter extreme conditions. Sometimes the aircraft reveals capabilities that weren't anticipated in its design documentation. He paused. Or perhaps capabilities that were anticipated by someone, but never formally developed. The meaning was perfectly clear. He knew, or had concluded enough to proceed as though he knew. Colonel Dawson, Garrett said, please ensure all mission telemetry is secured for detailed analysis. He straightened slightly. Major Hargrove, the scientists you recovered have provided interesting background on their research. Their propulsion system incorporated machine learning algorithms designed to optimize performance in real time, adapting to changing conditions faster than human operator response would permit. A pause. Remarkably similar in its underlying philosophy to a concept your father proposed some years ago. A concept that was perhaps not rejected because it was wrong, but because the technology hadn't yet caught up with the vision. Kate recognized the precision of what he was doing. He was offering her something, and framing it in a way that acknowledged her father without quite acknowledging guardian. My father was often right about things before the infrastructure existed to prove it, she said carefully. Indeed, Garrett agreed, which is why I've made a recommendation to the Secretary of Defense this evening, a formal program review and potential development authorization for your father's autonomous support concept, with appropriate resources, appropriate oversight, and appropriate protection this time. He let that word protection sit in the air between them. I'd like you to lead it, Major Hargrove, officially. With full authorization and the institutional support that should have been there from the beginning. The offer was real. It was also complicated. Official development meant resources and institutional protection. It also meant oversight and political constraints, and the constant risk that the technology would be shaped by interests that had nothing to do with keeping pilots alive. I look forward to reviewing the program parameters in detail, Admiral, she said, which was neither yes nor no, but was the only honest answer. Garrett's thin smile acknowledged the calibration of her response. We'll speak when you're back at Edwards. Well done, Major, both of you. The screen went dark. Dawson turned to her in the silence. Well, it seems your father's work will finally receive official recognition. Under circumstances he couldn't have planned for, Kate said, and with people he didn't entirely trust. He navigated that his whole career, Dawson said. You know that better than anyone. She did. Robert Hargrove had understood that the military was not a monolith, that within its enormous complexity existed people of genuine conscience, alongside people of pure ambition, people who cared about the mission, alongside people who cared about the budget line, people who would fight for innovation, alongside people who would protect the status quo with the ferocity of those who had built their careers on it. He had worked within that complexity for 40 years. He had accomplished extraordinary things and been stopped from accomplishing others. He had died knowing that the most important work of his life remained unfinished. Kate walked out into the desert night at Al Dafra. The storm that had been hammering the Hindu Kush was a distant memory here. The sky above the UAE was clear and dense with stars, the kind of sky you only saw away from city lights, the kind that made the distance feel intimate rather than vast. She thought about Thomas. She thought about him the way she had learned to, not with the sharp edge of grief that had characterized the first year, but with the steadier ache of absence, the kind that becomes part of how you understand your own life rather than an interruption of it. He would have had opinions about tonight. He would have had opinions about Garrett's offer. He would have had opinions about her decision to bring Guardian into the field, delivered with the directness of someone who had grown up in the same house under the same father, and therefore trusted her completely while reserving the right to tell her when he thought she was wrong. She missed his opinions. Guardian had done tonight what her father had said it would do, not replacing the pilots, not making their decisions for them, but extending their reach, filling in the gaps between what human capability could achieve and what the situation demanded. Caldwell was alive because of it. The hostages were alive because of it. The mission had succeeded because of it. What happened next would be determined by choices made in offices and conference rooms and secure facilities, by people with varying degrees of commitment to the right outcome. Kate could not control all of those choices. She could control her own. She would accept Garrett's offer under conditions she would negotiate carefully, conditions that preserved the technology's original purpose and the independence required to serve that purpose without compromise. She would document everything. She would build the kind of institutional record that made retroactive distortion difficult. And she would continue to do what she had always done: understand the machines better than anyone else in the room, listen to what they were trying to say, and trust the judgment of someone who had been taught to listen by the best. Caldwell would recover. He would return to flying. His experience with Guardian, a name he still didn't know, an origin he still hadn't traced, had altered something in him, she believed. The pilot who had begun this week as a talented young man performing for evaluators would not be the same man who finished it. He had discovered, at 30,000 feet over a mountain in a blizzard, what mechanical empathy actually felt like when it was the only thing standing between him and the ground. That understanding would spread. It always did. The best pilots became teachers, and the best teachers changed the pilots who came after them, and over time the standard of what was possible moved in the direction of what had once seemed exceptional. It was how progress worked, not in dramatic announcements, but in the accumulated weight of individual decisions made by people willing to carry the harder option a little further. Kate stood under the desert stars until the cold became insistent, and then she went inside. There was paperwork to complete, and program parameters to review, and a conversation with Colonel Dawson about what the next months would look like, and eventually a flight back to Edwards and the family home on the hill, and the study where her father's photograph still stood on the desk beside the lamp. The sky above the desert was the same sky that had always called to Hargrove's, and she would answer it tomorrow, and the day after, carrying forward the work that mattered in the way her father had taught her, not for recognition, not for the satisfaction of being right, but because the alternative was to let people die who didn't have to. That had always been the whole of it. Robert Hargrove had understood that. Thomas had understood it in his way. Kate had understood it since she was 7 years old with grease on her hands in a sunlit hangar, learning to listen to what a machine was trying to say. She still was. A note from the author. If you've stayed with Kate Hargrove from that first shudder in the cockpit all the way to the stars above Al Dafra, then you already know why I wrote this story, and why I believed you, specifically, would understand it. This is a story about inheritance. Not the inheritance that comes with a reading of a will, but the kind that lives in the hands, passed down in early mornings in a hangar, patient voices explaining why the machine does what it does. Robert Hargrove gave his daughter something no classroom could replicate: the ability to listen to a thing that cannot speak. I wrote Kate for readers who have lived long enough to know that the rule book and the right thing are not always the same document. You've watched institutions protect themselves at the expense of the people they were built to serve. You've seen visionaries dismissed and proven right a decade too late, after the cost was already paid in full. Robert Hargrove was one of those visionaries. His daughter is the reckoning. But I also wrote this story because I believe something that gets harder to hold as the years accumulate. That the next generation, given the right foundation, will carry the best of what we built into territory we never reached. Captain Caldwell begins this story as a gifted young man who mistakes polish for depth. He ends it understanding something about machines and courage and partnership that can't be found in any training manual, because Kate Hargrove didn't just save his life. She handed him the same gift her father handed her. Guardian, the quiet system threaded through these pages, is more than technology. It is the argument of the story made tangible, that the right partnership between human wisdom and machine precision doesn't diminish the pilot. It completes the mission. It brings people home. For those of you who have served, or loved someone who did, or simply lived long enough to understand that the difference between a hero and a casualty is sometimes a fraction of a second, and the right information at the right moment, this story was written with you specifically in mind. The sky still calls, and as long as there are people like Kate Hargrove willing to answer it, the rest of us can sleep a little easier. Thank you for reading.